Hello Internet, welcome to the in-depth feature review of Panasonic Lumix G7. In this review, I am going to walk you through the entire feature set of the newly launched Lumix G7, and we are going to talk about each individual features, including the cleaning of this camera, talking about the 4K video features, how to take a burst mode, a 4K burst mode in this camera, and pretty much everything. So this is a camera which is extremely loaded up with features, and I find it really useful to have somebody walk me through such a feature list, because sometimes reading through that manual is not an easy task, and guess who reads the manual any which ways. So there we go. Here you are with the Lumix G7 right in front of you, and I bought this camera for about $1,000, and since I bought this, I have fallen in love with this camera. This is an amazing camera, and I was planning to pick up a DSLR, probably a Canon 70D, but I finally landed up buying this camera, and I have no regrets for my Lumix G7. Though I do want to cover some of the shortcomings of a mirrorless camera versus a DSLR camera, which I'll talk you through as we talk about the camera as well. So without further ado, let's jump into the feature list of this camera, and let me talk to you about the high level features of this camera. So as you already know about this is a 4K camera. Records records 4 times the resolution of a normal HD camera. So this is a new feature list, and it does it at 30 frames per second, which is pretty decent. It is also a mirrorless camera, so the form factor is pretty small. It really snugly fits into your hand, so this is pretty decent camera. And this is a micro four thirds series, so it has a pretty small sensor compared to a regular DSLR or a full frame DSLR. So I'm going to show you the sensor now, and I do want to tell you that do not try to attempt this at home unless you really know about the cameras, but this is just for demonstration purpose, to tell you how small the camera sensor is compared to a regular DSLR, a full frame DSLR. It's not very different from the APS-C series, which is about 1.5 the crop factor of regular Canon DSLR. This is it closer to the camera's sensor, so you can use a brush which you typically get from a camera cleaning store. This is a brush, and in this particular case you'll have to obviously touch the sensor. So I'm very gently going to touch it and just show you. So just snugly clean any dust particles if you have it, and it sort of takes it out. Now in some extreme cases there might be sticky dust which you can't take out, and for those you have another apparatus as shown here, and this basically takes out any other dust particles that you might have. So be very careful while using this, and you bring this in very close to the sensor, and you lightly remove the edge of the sensor's dust if there is any. So you simply just remove it without scratching it. Ensure that you don't rub it onto this, just go very close to the sensor and clean it up without. Okay, so that was for demonstration, and now I'm gonna put the lens back. And I'm gonna keep the cleaning device back into its pouch. So that was about cleaning the camera. That's the first step you typically would do when you use the camera for a while and you need it. Alright, so now we let's jump into the camera's review itself. So here is the review of the Lumix G7's features. So first thing first, this is a 4K camera, and that's one of the most important feature set here. This has got several dial modes. So the top dial modes you see here are all in some way or form connected to the usage of this camera, and I'm going to take you through each one of these, okay, and explain to you how exactly does these dial sets work. So first thing first, let's switch on the camera, and this is how you switch it on. And you have a flip open screen here, which is also touch sensitive. So this is how you flip open the screen, and you can turn this around and put it back onto the slot, and this gives you a good view through the screen of the image, and you can also view the image through the viewfinder, and I would like you to have a look at it. So that's the image that I've taken, and I'm just gonna show you probably a picture that I would like to take. Okay. So that's the live viewfinder. I want you to have a look at the live viewfinder. The live viewfinder does have some features about the camera. It shows you things like, you know, shutter speed, the aperture speed. It talks to you about the aperture size. It talks to you about the exposure compensation, so on and so forth. So live view is a very useful feature, and right now it's in the recording mode, I presume, and it also tells you the ISO. This is the ISO, and I'm just simply going to depress the shutter and see what happens. So as you can see, that pictures are being taken from the live view, and this is unique to a mirrorless camera because you don't have an electronic viewfinder. And typically DSLRs, you directly have the viewfinder is directly linked to the camera's lens, and you see the image through the lens. Here also you see through the lens, but here what you see is what the camera's sensors show you. So that's about the electronic viewfinder. Now this is the function F5 button is a toggle button, which basically is used to toggle between the touchscreen display and the EVF. You can actually keep both of them on as well, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. Alright, so let's jump into the feature set of this camera. First thing first, I want to talk to you about the most important dial, which is this main dial. And this main dial basically has all the features that a DSLR would have as well. And let's go through each of these priority modes. Okay, so as a novice, I presume that you would start off with something called as the auto intelligent mode, and here you'd have got to do nothing. It's just a point and shoot camera here, like your mobile phone. So you just depress the shutter and it takes a snap and you're done. So the camera decides everything. It decides the exposure, it decides the ISO, it decides the aperture size, it talks about it decides the shutter speed, all of that. So this is the most basic of the modes. Yep. And the next mode is called the P mode. The P mode is the next step towards professional photography, or moving from absolute point and shoot to some level of professionalism. So here the camera chooses one or two features, like it chooses the aperture, it chooses the shutter speed, and you can choose another feature. So for example, I can choose ISO, and the camera will choose the appropriate aperture and shutter speed for that particular ISO, or rather the other way around. So I can choose an aperture and the camera will choose the right shutter speed and the right ISO for that. This is aperture priority. Here I can toggle with my aperture's f-stop number. So what it does is, let's just go through this for a file. Okay, so let's assume that I want to take a snap of this particular subject. So my aperture priority mode is going to use, I can use this particular mode dial here to change my, oops, okay, alright, so what you do is, if you put it in the aperture priority mode, you can change the aperture, of course. This is the aperture which I'm changing using this particular dial. So as you would notice that the aperture is changing, and this is basically used, as you all would know, to control the background blur, or also called the bokeh in some lingo. So it basically decides the background blur, and I'm going to just show it to you as a quick demonstration. So let's assume we've got a subject here and we've got another subject behind it, and we want to create that beautiful bokeh. So it's not going to be very easy to do it here because the subject is pretty close to me. So I am going to place this camera here, and you would see that the background has got blurred. Now if I increase my aperture number, the f-stop number, to 22, which basically reduces the size of the aperture, then everything typically gets onto focus, and that's what the aperture priority mode does. I'm not going to go into details of what each mode does because I presume there are several videos available to do that, but here I simply want to tell you how does these features work for Panasonic G7. So that's aperture priority mode, and this is shutter priority mode. And shutter priority modes decide this shutter speed in the camera. This has amazing shutter priority capabilities. It can go, I presume, all the way up to 16,000 of a second, which is amazing. Now 16,000 of a second can only be achieved if you are using the electronic shutter mode, not the physical shutter mode. So the physical shutter mode takes a physical flap comes down, but the electronic shutter pretty much operates like a mobile phone, and which I presume goes up to about 4,000th of a second. Now most DSLRs, including the high-end DSLRs, only have up to 4,000, and it's only when you really walk into the professional series that you get the 16,000 above shutter speed, because that's a shutter speed required for extremely fast movements. So by doing that, Panasonic has ventured or challenged the territory of really high-end DSLRs, taking them by its horns really. So that's shutter speed. Now let's move into the next mode. Before I get into the manual mode, I just wanted to spend a few minutes on the other modes. So you also have a creative mode here. So creative mode is pretty much a camera decided mode. So assuming that this is your subject, the creative mode lets you, of course, and this is touchscreen, so no points for guessing that. So it lets you choose a particular format. So this is retro, for example, this is expressive, and the camera pre-decides the format. So it's good. It's a gimmicky feature, I would say, for novice, but it's not a bad feature. So this is a miniature effect, if you may, and you can even choose a single color here, and I have other videos which show each of these features separately, but here I don't want to get into the feature set per se, but I want to broadly cover Panasonic G7's features. So that's the creative mode, and then you have the scene mode. The scene mode is very similar to creative mode, but it gives you an option of choosing a particular scene. So for example, I'm going to use a portrait scene, so I simply need to choose this particular scene and then depress the shutter. So these are cool features for people who want to get into photography. Not much for people who already know photography, so I don't really fancy this, but hey, it's there. And you also have the next feature is called the panoramic mode. The panoramic mode is similar to mobile phones panoramic mode. You basically pan the camera and you get a wider view of the subject. You have custom mode, so you can pre-assign few things in the camera, so you can decide that your customer is going to focus on a particular aperture, a particular shutter speed, and you come back to that particular custom mode and it simply captures that. And this is the movie mode. We'll get into the movie mode in detail separately, but for now, if you use this particular mode and then depress the shutter, the camera becomes a movie camera, a video recorder. So that's what it does. Alright, so now let's get into the most important of the modes, the manual mode. And this, like any other camera, helps you decide everything with regards to your camera. So it lets you change the shutter speed, it lets you change the ISO. You be the judge here, you decide. And what this camera also does is it's got this cool feature of keep showing you a preview. So if I were to learn photography and I want to get into the manual mode and see how my subject's going to look like, the camera is also going to go and show you a preview. In this particular case, as you can see, my subject is slightly underexposed, so I am going to increase the aperture, and now the subject is overexposed or slightly exposed, or as you may want to decide. So this is a cool feature, and you can also control the aperture, you can control the shutter speed. So there are a lot of cool things that you can do, and this is the ISO that I'm controlling right now. And so as you can see, the ISO is really, no, this is the shutter speed, I'm sorry. So as I was mentioning, in the physical shutter world, it goes up to 4,000th of a second. So obviously everything turns very dark when the shutter speed increases, and as I reduce the shutter speed, everything comes to light. Sometimes it's quite counterintuitive how you speak about shutter speed. Reducing the shutter speed actually reduces the amount of light, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, I was just taking a little off track there. So this is what the manual mode does. Now I want to move into the left side of the camera, which toggles some of the new modes which most of the other DSLRs do not have. Now this is the territory that is going to be interesting for a lot of you who are wanting to invest in this particular camera. Now the first of that is the regular camera release mode. So if you depress the shutter, it takes one snap and you're done with it. Now assuming that I want to take several snaps, so then there's a mode which I move it into, and here I can take multiple shots, and if I depress the shutter now, it will take multiple shots in this particular mode. I need to keep my subject a little far off, because until the camera captures the subject, it does not let me take photos. Okay, all right. So in this particular mode, what you see is an option where you can take multiple pictures. You can take up to 8 frames per second in this camera, which is pretty good because most of the DSLRs do not have that option, including the Canon 5D Mark III has 6 frames per second. I think the Canon 70D has 7 frames per second, but 8 frames per second is really cool, and that's, I think, because it doesn't have the additional operation of lifting the flap of the optical viewfinder, so they can increase the shutter speed. But nevertheless, that's a good feature to have. So 8 frames per second, pretty good. Now let's get into the next mode, which is called the 4K mode. This is a very interesting mode. Now what Panasonic has done is that they've turned this camera into, because it has the capability to take 4K videos, they have turned that feature into stills photography also. Now what 4K does is that it takes very high resolution pictures of almost 8 million pixels at 30 frames per second. So what they have cleverly done is that they have converted that particular feature into a stills feature, and they have said that, hey, if you can take 8 megapixels of 30 frames per second, that is in 1 second 30 frames, then you can probably start using that as a stills camera. So in that particular mode, this camera turns into a very high shutter speed camera. So it takes images of 8 megapixels at 30 frames per second. Now that's amazing, because you get very good decent size images for 8 megapixels. You can easily use that for your Facebook or web postings or any of the regular work that you might do. Of course, you can't blow it up to a huge billboard size, but 8 megapixels is pretty decent. Most of the cameras, current cameras today only have 8 to 10 megapixels. So that's what 4K does. and I want to give you a small demonstration about that particular feature. So let's get into the menu set here, and we will get into this in detail, but I'm just covering the 4K photo mode, which is really interesting mode. And here you have got three modes within the 4K mode. So you can simply choose to take 30 frames per second 4K photos, and the camera will, I'm going to move it to the manual mode because it's not capturing some pictures. So here you see that it's taking 30 frames per second, and these are all displayed as separate images, so you can choose to take which image you want to pick from it. And let's say you like this particular image, then you can simply choose it as your image, and you can save that particular image. Now so here you can save this image if I like this particular image. So that's what 4K does. Now interestingly, 4K also does another thing, which is called the 4K PreBurst mode. And what 4K PreBurst does, and this is really interesting, is that when you keep this 4K in the PreBurst mode, the camera switches on its video camera. So it's actually recording now without me even depressing the shutter. And what it does is it records the images, and it also keeps deleting it. So if you just leave this like this, it's actually doing some work and the camera would heat up. So this is used for those candlelight moments, blowout moments, or whatever, where you need to quickly make decisions or take a snap. So assuming that you're taking a snap of your child in a birthday party, and you need to quickly take a snap, and you don't have time to really know when exactly is your child going to blow that candle out. So you keep it in this mode, and the camera is actually now recording the image. So what happens is, if I now depress the shutter, the camera does a very cool feature. It takes that particular pre-recorded image, and that puts it back into the review of images, so you don't miss out on the blowout. So here actually the camera I've just depressed the shutter once, but the camera has taken so many pictures because it was recording even before you started depressing the shutter. So this gives you an edge for you not to miss out that particular moment. All you need to do is just point this camera at the subject and start taking the picture. So that's the PreBurst mode, and of course you can save this image as well if you would like to. And let's now go into the last mode, which is the SS mode. Now the camera in this particular mode, it just does a quick video recording. So if I depress the shutter, it's taking a video, and if I release the shutter, it will stop taking the video. So it's for any quick moments of videos that you want to take, and then it will show that video as an image, so you can take one image out of it. So various features in the 4K mode, but pretty cool. Alright, so I don't want to save this image. Let's go back into a menu set again. Now the next feature I want to discuss with you today is the bracketing or the exposure compensation mode. Now this camera has a preset exposure compensation, which you can decide based on what you would want as a preset. So you can either take three snaps at various f points, or you can take 5, or you can take 7, and the camera will automatically take those number of pictures. So in this particular case, I have preset this to 5 shots, so it will take 5 shots at various exposures, and you can later combine that in post and take an HDR image. So it's taken 5 pictures, and if I review those pictures, you would see that each of these images are in various exposures. So that's what the exposure compensation mode does, and I would like you to look at this mode and just recognize it by the stack of pictures that you have, the stack of images that you show there, and a plus or minus button. Probably I should just show you very quickly that mode as well. There are so many modes in this camera that you tend to take a while to understand the menu system. Okay, never mind, I'll show it to you when I go through the menus. All right, so the next thing is delay shutter mode. Delay shutter mode, like any other camera, you can decide to choose that the release, after you press the button, you can go and take a snap, and the camera will automatically take the picture after a while. So let's just try that. So in this particular, it's 10 seconds of delay, and after 10 seconds the camera will take a picture, and you can move this from between 4, 8 and 10 seconds. So here you go. So that's delay mode, and this one is this is a nice one which I want to just share with you. It's called the time lapse mode, and here, and this particular mode is not available in most of the DSLRs. It's only available in high-end DSLRs, and even in high-end DSLRs, the intervalometer or the time-lapse mode simply takes the images and it doesn't combine those images. I think in Mark D5, Canon 5D Mark III, it does combine the images into a movie, but in this particular case it even combines it into a movie. So let's just put it in this mode, and let me just quickly show you how it works. Alright, so we'll go to the menu, and this is the time-lapse animation mode. I go into the time-lapse mode and I choose the start time now, or I can even choose it on a later time. I can set the time, and I go into the shooting interval. I choose the number of images I want, the time, the interval I want, all of that, and just start using this as a intervalometer, as a time-lapse video, and it starts capturing. I've got another video showing that, so if you're interested you can look at that particular feature set in detail, but for this particular series I just wanted to tell you that there is a time-lapse mode here. Okay, now let's move on to the other features of this camera. The next feature that I wanted to share with you is the regular shoe mount, horseshoe mount that you've got here. They give you a cover along with it, which is pretty cool, and there are several buttons here. Before we get into that, let me just show you the tripod mount. This is a tripod mount, and let me also show you the battery housing. You just toggle this flap open and the battery housing shows you the battery. This is the battery, and also has the camera's fast memory card. And here I would like to tell you that if you're buying this camera, please buy a fast memory, something similar to the one I bought. This is a 32 GB 95 megabytes per second speed, and this is really useful for a camera of this nature, because if you're going to take snaps in 4K mode, then you better have something of this nature. So this is a SanDisk 32 GB data storage, class 10 speed, and it's also ultra high speed. So very useful, especially for this particular kind of camera series. And it records it transfers the data at 95 megabytes per second. So this is really cool. All right, so that's the memory card. Let me just shove that back. All right, okay, so going back into the feature set again. Take a snap, and there are two mode dials here, very interesting mode dials, and the good part is Panasonic has filled this up with mode dials. So what this mode dial does, these are both customizable, by the way, so you can change these mode dials to whatever you want to change. In this particular case, it's already pre-assigned to, in my case, it's pre-assigned to ISO and white balance, and you can press this particular button and then it changes its character. So if I'm going to use this like a regular mode dial in the manual mode, so in this particular manual mode I'm just toggling with this particular mode, and as you can see it is changing my shutter speed. Alright, so that's what it's doing right now. And the front button, the front dial, it will change my aperture. So here I can move that and change my aperture. Now assuming I want to use this to change my ISO, I can do that as well. So let me just make this image a little dark for you. and now I want to change my ISO. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to press this button, and now this changes character, and as you can see now it's changing the ISO, and the image is getting brighter and brighter. I release this. I release this, shutter speed changes. I hold this, ISO changes, and if I hold this and I change this particular dial, my white balance changes. This is pretty cool. So I can set my white balance to either pre-adjusted ones, or I can even go into a white balance number and move it there. So this is pretty amazing. I'm just going to keep it back into auto white balance. Alright, so that's what the additional dial and this particular button does. Now looking at the camera's main feature set from behind the camera, the first thing that you would notice is that there is a AF lock button here, so you can lock the AF either into the manual focus mode, or you can move it into autofocus continuous mode, or you can move it into autofocus single mode. Okay, the autofocus single / autofocus flexible mode is typically used if you have a static subject, somebody's portrait or something, where you don't expect the subject to move too much, like in this particular case. But assuming that you've got a child running around and you want something more dynamic, then you use the continuous mode. You can even use this for sports photography, where there is a lot of movement, fast movement happening, and in this particular case it's of course manual focus, which controls the focus from this particular focus ring. Okay, now let's look at this particular function, the function F5. Function F5 controls the display of your image on the touch screen as well as the EVF. So I can move it between here. I can switch off the touch screen if I want to and only keep it here. If I press it again, it comes here. So it basically toggles. There are 2-3 modes, so I can either keep it on this particular mode where only the EVF has that particular display, or I can keep it here. If you're operating in a dark environment and you want too much of light, you can just look through the EVF and switch the others, the touch screen off, which is a pretty cool feature, I think. And of course it also has a sensor here which detects if your eye is close to the eyepiece, so it automatically toggles. There is another feature. So for example, this particular case, see, in this particular case, when I'm keeping my finger and typically it would be your eye, and you're looking through the EVF, your shutter will, your image will in the screen will automatically switch off, which is very cool because it saves battery. And why do you need to have the images in two places any which ways? Moving on, we have the flash release mode. So if I press this mode, the flash will come on, and this is the flash. Shoe. So we've covered the flash, we've covered the toggle button for EVF versus display, we've covered this. Now let's look at the quick menu mode. Okay, so here there are a bunch of features which you can play around with. You can make your picture vivid, standard, custom, or blah blah blah. There's a bunch of features. I will not get into that, but it sort of gives you a cool feature. You can even choose your video format. So now I've right now chosen the video format of MP4 and 4K at 30 frames per second. I can choose it for AVCHD, which is a Panasonic format. Typically for Panasonic and Sony have this format, so I would keep it at MP4. You can go up to full HD. Capability is up to 60 frames per second. Very cool for taking slow photography, or if you want to really capture a very slow motion photography, this is pretty cool. So I'm going to keep it back at 4K because that's what it's good at. You can go up to VGA 30 frames per second, and it shows you the time frame as well. If you go into, I think, AVHD mode, it goes really high. It goes to 2 hours 8 minutes, so you can record the video for 2 hours 30 minutes, 8 minutes, depending on the mode that you're gonna use. In MP4 4K mode, it records it up to 30 minutes, and I presume it is because of some European law, because this is not classified as a video camera. This is a regular camera, and if it goes beyond 30 minutes, it automatically gets classified as a video camera, and you've got to pay more taxes, I believe. Anyway, so moving on. So this is the aspect ratio. You can control it from a quick menu, and you can even control the quality of the image that you're drawing into the camera. So I have chosen RAW, which is amazing, and this is the best part of any DSLR or any mirrorless camera. It captures all the details very clearly into a RAW format. You can have a RAW plus standard, you can have a RAW plus fine, you can move into fine, and you can use a standard format, which is a JPEG format. And as you can see, the number of images in this particular case is shown as 43,836 images. For RAW, it only shoots about 1,828 images. So that's the quality of image. Pretty cool features, and I'm just going to keep it at RAW for now. So let's toggle back. You can use the touchscreen to change your metering mode, have center weighted metering, multi-metering, and spot metering. Typically I use spot metering because it's very useful if you want to do focus recomposure, but I'll just leave it at center weighted for now. Alright, so this is the playback mode button. So if I press this button, then the playback enters. So I am just going to show you, and you can view all your emojis. The good part is that you can, of course, pinch to zoom like you would do in a regular iPhone. I'm sorry, it's absolutely not in focus. So let me take an image which is in focus. Otherwise you might presume that this camera doesn't take focused images at all. So here I can toggle it, or I can use the toggle button here to see my pictures very clearly. It takes astounding pictures, and I'm going to share some pictures that I've taken with this camera. Pretty amazing pictures, very good pictures. Alright, so let's go into the display mode. The display mode is interesting because you can control what this particular screen will show you. In this particular display mode, you can see all the technical features. So if you're a camera lover and you're super expert on your camera, obviously as a professional you would love this mode, because in one screen it tells you everything. It tells you my f-stop number, it tells me my shutter speed number, it tells me my ISO, and in fact I can change my ISO from here as well. So let me just go back, and tells me my exposure compensation. So very nice one pager. And if I want to move into another feature, if I want to switch it off, I can switch it off. Now this is a typical display which I use with a crossbar, to take those images in the right spot. Basically have the rule of thirds play on into this particular image with these grid lines here. And you also have histogram, which can be moved around if you want to. So if you know about histograms, you can use it here. You can keep your finger, and the camera does the job of focusing as well. Alright, so we were on the display. This camera has so many features, it gets confusing after a point in time. Alright, so let's go back into the display. So there is, as I said, the mode which a professional would use, or you can switch it off, or you can have a mode where you can see all the features here. Now let's move into the dial, which is what you see here, where you can control the ISO, you can control the white balance, you can assign an F function 3 button here, and you can also control the metering, I guess. And you have a final button here which is called the F function 4 button, where it is pre-assigned to delete pictures. So if I don't like a picture, I simply go into the picture, I delete this button. It gives me an option to delete all or delete multiple. If I want to delete it, I just say yes and it's gone. I can obviously use the touchscreen to do the same. So let me just show you using touchscreen. So I say delete single, delete this picture, it's gone. All right, so that's what this button does. Now I'm going to take a break here because this pretty much covers all the external features. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this. This is a record button. You can use it apart from this particular mode dial to record. It does the same thing. This is just a good button to have, I guess, for some people who just want to quickly record. But you can do the same thing here, or you can go into the menu and start recording as well. So these are all the external buttons of the camera. Here's the mic output where you can speak into the camera. All right, I just forgot to tell you about the feature sets in terms of the slots. So you have a remote shutter mode here. You can fix the remote shutter and take snaps. I highly recommend that because sometimes especially in the night photography, you need a remote shutter. UHD HDMI output, which is amazing. It automatically gives this input into your video camera, or you can use this particular last proprietary slot to do an AV out for your digital image capture. I haven't used it because I think for me what's more convenient is to simply toggle this out, take the memory card, and I'm done with it. So I haven't used that particular option, but nevertheless you have it. Here you also have a mic button, a mic option where you can draw out audio to an external device that you might have, like a lavalier microphone or a shotgun microphone, which is a pretty cool feature. Does not have, I think, doesn't, you can't know your mic output, so there's no feature for that, but hey, that's really pro feature again, right? So that's pretty much about this camera. I'm gonna do in-depth review of the menu features, because all of these features, if you go into it, will open up the menu, and I think we need to go into that again in detail. So I will cover that in another video. If you have any questions regarding the buttons, layout, or anything regarding this camera, do not hesitate to put that in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer them. I've used this camera quite extensively. I've been using this for the last 7 months since the camera has got released, and I've been really loving this camera. It's a pretty good camera. I love this camera. I highly recommend this camera for anybody who wants to enter the world of photography and start shooting right away. Please use this camera. It's amazing. And with that, I want to thank you and bring this video to a closure. Thank you very much again. Goodbye. See you in the next video.